Hello everyone, welcome to week 5. This week revolves around determining which vocabulary requires explicit instruction and an understanding of useful strategies for vocabulary instruction. How to write measurable objectives will also be explored. Your learning outcomes for this week are to identify pre, during, and post-reading instructional strategies, understand visualization and how to implement it with trade books, determine which vocabulary requires explicit instruction and an understanding of useful strategies for vocabulary instruction, determine the definition, purpose, and instructional strategies for academic vocabulary, and understand how to write measurable learning objectives and/or outcomes. As you can see, there are no course readings for this week. Let's take a look at the PowerPoint. The read aloud for this week is See the Ocean by Estelle Condra. This is a great read aloud to share with students when you're talking about visualization. When I was in a classroom, I did this read aloud with students a little differently than my other interactive read alouds. I would share the book, but not show any of the illustrations as I was reading. I wanted the students to visualize what the author was saying. Your first PowerPoint response is to state why visualization is an important component of reading comprehension. This week, we are also talking about, bear with me just a moment, teaching vocabulary to students. Dorothy Frayer and her colleagues at the University of Wisconsin designed this graphic organizer to provide for a thorough understanding of new words. Your word goes here. The students are asked to define it in their own words, to write facts and characteristics about the word, to give examples of the word, and non-examples of the word. This graphic organizer will lead students to a deeper understanding of a word and its relationship to their own lives. This model is easily adapted to your content areas. As we know, students have 4 vocabularies: listening, speaking, reading, and writing. Research tells us that in order to learn vocabulary, students need to be active in the process. They gain vocabulary from immersion in words, and students augment the vocabulary through repeated exposure to words. Here are some sources of words. Now, selecting words to teach. Learning how to improve vocabulary instruction through teacher study groups by Dimino and Taylor explains how to choose which vocabulary to teach based on the following: its importance, its usefulness, student factors, and natural context. This leads into academic vocabulary, the language used in textbooks, in classrooms, and on tests. This is discussed on pages 179 through 181 of Subjects Matter. On the MVNU lesson plan template, there is a section to put the academic terms that the student will need to know in the lesson. The very next section on the lesson plan template addresses language demand. asking how the students will use the language skills of listening, reading, writing, and speaking. And how will you incorporate the academic language in your lesson plan? Another expert on vocabulary is Bob Marzano. And if you just Google Marzano, tons of information about vocabulary pops up. Students are often asked to learn vocabulary terms by being told to look up the definitions in the dictionary and to write them out. Research tells us this is ineffective. They need to be active in the process when learning the new vocabulary, as with the Frayer Model. The Collins Co-Build Dictionary uses the word in the definition and real-world language. An example is for the word summarize. In the Co-Build Dictionary, it says, to summarize, you tell the important points of the material read. This is another great addition for your professional bookshelf. Here are just a few websites dedicated to vocabulary. You've been working on your dyslexia strategy lesson, which is due this week. Remember, this focuses on content materials, nonfiction. In weeks 1 through 5, there are resources to help you with this assignment. In week 5, this week, there is an example of a dyslexia strategy lesson for you to use. When working on your lesson, be sure to read the information in the left margin of the lesson plan template and use the rubric as a guide too. Make sure your objectives are measurable. Measurable lesson objectives are also known as measurable learning outcomes and include the following parts. Conditions. A statement about the conditions under which the behavior is to be performed. There's a behavioral verb, an action word that is an observable student behavior. Criteria, a statement that specifies how well the student must perform the behavior. There is a video that you can view on YouTube explaining more about how to write measurable learning objectives. If you have questions about writing these objectives, please ask me. I don't want you to do them wrong and not do well on this assignment. Your dyslexia assignment is submitted in 2 places. It's submitted on Moodle and Chalk and Wire. You have to submit it 2 different times. Rubrics for the assignment are on Moodle, and the Chalk and Wire rubric is also found there. If you have any questions at all, please ask me. Thank you.